but the chief of staff and the staff secretary can just sign documents to approve use of presidential signature pen in areas of responsibility. Wild. We did not find specific meeting notes that clearly mention or note that the president was present. He wasn't there at the meetings. That's curious.
There was a letter that surfaced from the Department of Justice, from the Merrick Garland Department of Justice to the White House saying, look, you can't use that Autopen on legal documents. So they were warned from their own Department of Justice about overusing that Autopen, yet they continued to do it.
Bombshell memo now released. We got this one courtesy of Just the News. And as you can see, it says that Biden aides had one position on how the pardons should be effectuated. And that really didn't happen. And in fact, it turns out Joe Biden may not have even been in the meetings where they were discussing these pardons. And so how can they carry the weight and the heft of the executive branch, of the power of the presidency? They can't. If the president didn't actually review anything and authorize it and stamp on it, then it's invalid, is the argument. And the memos show the back and forth that occurred from inside the Biden White House. They're sending letters and emails, communicating amongst themselves, and then they report to us the following, saying, Just the News got these documents saying that at the beginning of the administration that Joe Biden's aides believed that he had an obligation to personally sign these presidential actions, okay? He comes in, he's like, no. They're like, can we just auto pen like everything? Like, no, he's got to sign some of these things. That's because, he's the president and it's a symbolic confirmation that it's his approval. And chronicle in these emails how the former president later outsourced all of those decisions to Kamala, which you can't do. She's not the president. Never will be. Now, the memos were gathered as part of a sweeping review by the Trump White House. So they're digging into it. They're like, oh, we'll just look at your email account since we have them now. And now it's raising new questions about whether Joe Biden even actually attended 4 meetings that were all dedicated to making these decisions. It included preemptive pardons for family members, as well as commutations for federal death row sentences. Now, the National Archives was digging this stuff up. You can see now published, courtesy of Just the News and others, explaining here. We've got this email, January 17th, looks like a memo rather, from the Biden-Harris stolen transition team. Oh gosh, kind of like flashbacks to this. This is a memo. Soon as they're getting ready to come in, right? Biden will be sworn in on the 20th. And this is a memo for the director of the Office of Records Management. And the subject is approval for presidential signature. So how do we handle Biden's signatures? Well, the following individuals are authorized to approve use of Biden's signature pen in areas of responsibility as noted. Wow. So the chief of staff can sign everything. Staff secretary can sign everything. Deputy staff secretary can only be signing things that are under the staff secretary. Then the executive clerk goes under the staff secretary. And these other people have different responsibilities. Now, if individuals other than those seek authorization, send them to me. Okay. But the chief of staff and the staff secretary can just sign documents to approve use of presidential signature pen in areas of responsibility. Wild. If individuals other than those want approval, let us know. We're not going to give you verbal authorizations. This memo supersedes any item on the same subject. So that's before he comes in. Then we get another decision memo. So this is February something that happens in 2021. So just maybe a month later. We don't have the exact date. Here's another memo for the president now. It's not the transition anymore. It says, we are now approving the routine use of document signatures by Autopen. Says, here's the statement of the purpose of this memo. Writing, this memo proposes general guidelines for which documents should be hand signed by you and which documents may have your signature affixed by use of the Autopen. And this is for the president. Okay, so the you is Joe. And it's funny because remember on his little cheat sheet cards they used to give him, he would say in that, we would see the text that would say, you stand here. You introduce yourself. Then he will introduce himself. And it was like paint by numbers. It was ridiculous. Now, in addition for documents that we recommend to be signed by the Autopen, this memo proposes narrow categories of routine, high volume documents, like what, presidential pardons, that may be approved by one or more of your, Joe, he's like, me? Yeah, your senior advisors and executed with the Autopen on your behalf. This memo also provides a proposed update of prior Autopen guidelines that you approved during the transition. Remember? He's like, no. These recommendations are intended to provide a framework for a more efficient signature process for you. Okay, so some of this stuff should have your signature. Some of this can have the Autopen. Now, based on precedent from Obama regarding documents, which documents are generally hand signed by the president. Okay, so follow the Obama tradition, not kind of skipping over Trump. Our recommendation is that as a general rule, Mr. President, you personally approve and hand sign all decisions that require presidential action. That's a lot. Those proposed categories are bills, veto messages, State of the Union, highly personalized or even customized correspondence that you want to share, mass casualty, military condolences, presidential Medal of Freedom citations, Medal of Honor, departure photos, presidential commissions, cabinet level commissions, agreements with a foreign government, and pardon letters. Wow. Other ceremonial items that are objects rather than paper, you can sign those, and other documents that you choose to hand sign, Joe. You have an option. Now, again, based on precedent, our recommendation, Joe, regarding which documents generally may be executed by Autopen and on your behalf are as follows. So all of this, including pardons, you should hand sign it. So what happened? Now they swapped it and the Autopen was just going like the Federal Reserve printer. Constant. Our recommendation regarding which documents generally may be executed by Autopens are the following. Executive actions that are not associated with a signing ceremony, personnel appointments or designations, there's like 10,000 people, right, in the executive, foreign leader correspondence and holiday cards. So if you're going to send something, a nice little message to Putin, commemorative proclamations, general correspondence, annual reports that the law requires, photographs not associated, renewals of national emergency declarations, not the new one, but the renewal, and federal disaster declarations, which those seem kind of strange. Like, why wouldn't you want the president to sign that? Anyways, maybe because it's quick. It's like, well, bomb went off over here. There's a national emergency. Yes, I approve it, but sign it. And you presume that even for these, it's not like just carte blanche, okay? It's not just like, well, I have permission to do it, so I'm just going to start sending a bunch of letters to my family members, courtesy of the president of the United States, right? Not going to be anything like that. Now, based on procedures followed during your presidential campaign, and when you were vice president, we propose a limited exception for certain categories of high volume or routine materials that instead of requiring your personal review could be approved for use of the Autopen by these people. Okay, so now you were VP. When we proposed a limited exception. And what is this exception? For certain categories of high volume or routine materials that instead of requiring your personal review could be approved for use of the Autopen by your staff secretary's office. Okay, so we got names here. Jess Hertz, Michael Hockman, Chief of Staff's office, Ron Klain, Bruce Reed, and Jen O'Malley Dillon. Wow. So we got like 5 presidents now who can just kind of follow a limited exception. Both staff secretary and chief of staff offices and their use of Autopen for these limited categories, absent your prior approval, would be authorized only after consultation with the director of Oval Operations and pursuant to other limitations that you choose. Okay, so Joe Biden can kind of delegate some of this to Oval Operations, and then they can delegate some of that to the staff. And here's what you can use this for. Certain sub-cabinet level designations by acting officers and other routine personnel actions can be approved by your chief of staff. So Biden would say, well, I'm approving you to do these things. I'm delegating this power to you. I don't need to personally sign all, 5,000 higher positions. But commemorative proclamations that are unlikely to garner significant media attention, as long as there's no new policy ground, they can be approved by your advisors. General correspondence, they can sign off on. Renewals on national emergencies, again, can be approved by deputy chief of staff. What the heck is going on? Federal disaster declarations can be approved by your deputy chief of staff for operations, subject to your consultation. Okay, so there is we get a little bit of, I'd like to see that on every sentence. Can be approved by your deputy chief of staff? How does the deputy chief of staff have the power to reapprove a national emergency? I mean, shouldn't that go to the president? So here's their recommendation. All right, Joe, Dementia Joe. We recommend that you approve 1, the proposed categories of the documents in section 1, and you acknowledge that you're going to put your hand signature on these things. And 2, the proposed categories may be executed on your behalf with the Autopen, which includes some national emergency stuff, and the proposed narrow categories of documents that generally may be approved by your other advisors. Now, of course, Mr. President, such decisions are subject to any specific exceptions or circumstances you prefer at this time because, you're the president. And he didn't read this even. He's like, okay, I don't even know what that was. That sounds good. Then here's another memo. So then this one changes. Now we're inching closer to the end of Joe Biden's presidency. His dementia's on full display. And now there's this memo that comes out from the Deputy Associate Counsel over to the Associate Counsel, so underling to a boss, copies senior legal assistant, shout out to the legal assistants, and special assistants to the White House counsel also gets notified. So the White House is getting this as, it sounds like it's probably Associate Counsel for the White House is what we would guess. Briefing memo, the White House counsel in the executive branch. Now, here's the statement of the purpose. Okay, this memo to everybody details the process that members of the White House clemency team has followed for clemency and pardon packages. This is the process. This is how they did it. I'm just letting you know. While no review is identical, my understanding is this general pattern has been consistent throughout the term. Here's the process. Well, the White House does an initial scoping. Should these people, be considered? Should it be murderers, drug addicts, whatever? And the clemency team is going to meet with senior advisors. Soon after the announcement of the previous one, they meet with senior advisors and they discuss the plan for the next round of clemency recipients. They're like, all right, which one of our donors need it most? How much have they donated? Clemency team comes to the meeting with a proposed approach for the next rounds of clemency, and they get feedback. Although clemency team has previously proposed categorical clemency actions, like so all the Hunter Biden crackheads are immune, senior advisors have preferred to focus on individual review and the appropriate criteria for that review, because you got to look at each case individually. You can't just say, well, everybody is pardoned, right? So I think even though Jimmy Carter did that. White House counsel's office, Ed Siskel, White House counsel and others were there. Bunch of names in this list. Neera Tanden, you know who she is. Stephanie Benjamin, some mayor. All of them are coming in. We want pardons for these people. So they have these little meetings, right? These little review sessions, these scoping meetings. Then the DOJ makes a recommendation. So the DOJ's Office of the Pardon Attorney then prepares a package of clemency and pardon recommendations consistent with the guidance from the advisors. After the package is cleared by the ODAG and signed by the deputy attorney, Pardon, the lawyer, then transmits the recommendations to the White House. Now, this often happens on a rolling basis as pardon and the reviews are processed. So then the White House clemency team, then they review a more fulsome recommendation by the DOJ. They get summary briefs and all of it goes to the Justice and Equity team. Look at this, a racial justice and equity team. Remember we used to live in a country like that? What a ridiculous thing. And the White House counsel. These summaries offer an initial recommendation on clemency and discuss whether they align with the criteria. So then we get adjudication and deliberation. So the White House clemency team, which includes RGE deputy, reviews the recommendations and discusses the candidates for the first time right here individually. The White House clemency team then agrees on a package of the clemency recipients for the White House counsel to review. Then after the White House determines, White House counsel, okay, so like not the president, they determine, so a decision is being made by somebody, which petitions to approve and advance, like a little filter system. And the president doesn't have to review and sign every pardon request. So you can say, yeah, no, bring me the good ones and I'll look at those. And then I'll exercise my decision on those. And so I think it's appropriate to have, like a filter team. The question is, are you executing on the pardons that are being effectuated? So the White House team then circulates an email to senior advisors with the petition summaries, a top lines document that provides demographic data of the package. They're like, well, we need a lot more black people in here. The draft comms material, such as draft presidential announcement for the package. Then the clemency team gets questions, convenes a meeting, and they review the petitioners, the people who want the pardons. Then they summarize the petitions. They highlight difficult cases. Now at this stage, senior advisors may approve some or all of the candidates for the president's review. That makes sense. Alternatively, depending on considerations like timing and a number of candidates, they may decide to hold the package altogether for a later date. They may also ask for more information. Now here's the note. In past situations, senior advisors have initially approved certain petitions at this stage, only to raise concerns later in the process. Like, well, this sounds good. And then you vet it more like, actually, this dude doesn't deserve it. Unfortunately, this has caused delays. Now, in these meetings, the vice president is represented, so Kamala is there. What's she gonna do? So her lawyer, Erica, comes in. Before a decision memo is transmitted to the president, the vice president has previously requested to review the petitioners individually and has raised detailed questions with the clemency team. This has also introduced significant unexpected delays. Why is Kamala coming in here and trying to meddle in this process? Significant unexpected delays, and therefore planning for VP's individual review will likely help expedite the process. So like she's going to come in and shove her nose in here because she's Kamala. So the staff secretary has also traditionally not been included at this stage. Last round, however, staff secretary pulled 2 candidates once the president's decision memo reached their office. The current staff secretary also holds domestic policy equities as head of the Office of Gun Violence, and so they would also help avoid these disruptions. Okay, so we still haven't gotten to the president yet. Then the White House counsel does some vetting. Once senior advisors approve the package, then the clemency teams vet the petitions. This vet includes reviewing a bunch of things. Do they have any liens on their property? Do they have any past convictions? Is there any negative media coverage? Are they on social media running their mouth? Are they going to be a problem for us? We also asked Pardon and the lawyers over there for an update on any infractions. Did they do anything bad while they're in custody? And then they review, they flag anything that's problematic. The White House counsel is generally not consulted at this stage. And each vet is fairly time intensive. Yeah, taking about an hour per petitioner. Yeah, did you guys have anything on him? Would you guys find? Depending on how much time passes, they may re-vet the candidates as well. So then we progress. Then the clemency team prepares a decision memo. Okay. For the president outlining the proposed clemency package with the recommendation summaries in this big report. The package has previously been prepared with the proposed announcement of other clemency and policy programs. So you don't just come out, pardon a bunch of people, tack it onto something so it's less offensive. Once the memo is cleared by the White House counsel and the deputy White House counsel, it's then circulated to senior advisors. Once senior advisors clear the memo, it then goes to the staff secretary, and then it undergoes many rounds of stylistic edits. Like, gosh, like no wonder nothing gets done in our government. As noted above, at this stage, the vice president has personally reviewed the petitions. Okay, she's not the president, so that's great. And also, as noted, the last round, as we get to this round, the memo was held for weeks during the staff secretary's review, and we've been assured this is not going to be the case going forward. Somebody said, you got to go fast. Once staff secretary declares the decision memo, then it is sent to the president for approval. Now, given the president's schedule, it can often take days or weeks for the president to review and approve the clemency package. And so the chief of staff has been helpful in getting the paper in front of him for his review. Here, Joe, put this pen in your hand. He has previously asked the White House counsel to discuss the candidates with him, although in the last round, the vice president's approval was sufficient to obtain his approval. Okay, so Kamala comes in, says, I love these people. Joe's like, all right, I'll take your word for it. I approve it because you approve it. Feels a little too delegating, but I still don't know that that's a problem, right? If she says, no, I'm going to take your advice. What do you think? You've done the review on this? Great. I'll sign off on it. But he's got to, review it, sign it as they recommended, and like go through that physical process. Thank you for telling me. I am now up for this person. Great. For that person. Great. Now, rollout. While the decision memo is with the staff secretary and the president, the clemency team then meets with comms, OPE, OLA, and they plan to roll it out. Depending on the context, we've taken various approaches to public-facing rollouts, depending on who's getting pardoned, I guess. The clemency team has drafted responsive TPs, hard Q&As, a presidential statement, because they got to come and explain all of it, and more. Now, once the president approves the package, the clemency team notifies the pardon and the ODAG, which coordinates notifying the Bureau of Prisons to tell the recipients the day before the announcement, you're going to get pardoned. Congrats. Pardon also prepares the warrant for the commutation, and then they notify the staff and the media the day before the announcement so that everybody can come with their cameras. Then, the day of the announcement, the White House clemency team coordinates the president's signing of the warrant and the delivery of the warrant by courier to the pardon attorney. Now, the same day, the White House posts the recipient list and any accompanying presidential statement as well, and that's the process that's been going on. And this is curious. There's like a bunch of these comments, people saying, does Ed play a role in this? What does this mean? What does pre-notify mean? Pre-notifies are alerts before the announcement, so they can be prepared for the rollout, all just kind of conversational stuff. So, sounds like a pretty normal process. Like the president delegates a bunch of the decisions and then can even, take advice before making the decision. And then he does make the decision and he approves it and signs off on the package. Like, oh, sounds pretty standard. Here's what we've got. Now, as this continues, we have this one now, December 11th, 2024. They have now lost the election. Trump's coming in. They're freaked out. So this comes from Rosa at the Executive Office of the President, White House. And she sends this over to other people at the Executive Office of the President, all listed here. Copies a bunch of people, mostly same divisions. This is about the presidential decisions on clemency and pardons. Here we go. COS Chief of Staff Jeff Zients got POTUS's verbal approval on the following decisions during a Thursday, December 5th decisional meeting with POTUS. Here's what happened. They wrote this in a memo. President approved categorical commutation of the sentences of individuals on the CARES Act home confinement who have demonstrated good behavior. It's 1,500 people with the final number to be determined by the Bureau of Prisons, okay? So it's broad and categorical, and you might say maybe he has the authority to do that, but you don't even know, like he can't sign off on all of them because it's an indefinite number. We don't even know who's getting them. So President also approved pardons for 39 individuals, former military service members and survivors of domestic violence who committed nonviolent low-level offenses and have demonstrated significant significant rehabilitation and contributions for the communities. Okay, so did he approve all of those individually? That's that memo. Then December 24th, here's what else we got. Same person is sending another memo. Chief of Staff Jeff Zients got POTUS's verbal approval again, right? He's not signing off on anything on the following decision during a 12/11 decisional meeting with the president and these other people, saying president approved the commutation of the sentences of 37 of 40 individuals on death row to life without the possibility of parole, which is interesting. It's like if he's opposed to the death penalty because he's a Catholic, I don't know why he's so pro-abortion, but that's a separate issue. But why wouldn't he also, if the death penalty is wrong, just commute the sentences of the other three? Like if he's going to be consistent with his policy, he should display it. Anyways, January 16th, 2025, we got 4 days coming out, man. They pack up, get out. Here is now more decisions on commutations. Rosa says, on January 11th, POTUS met with Jeff, Ed, Bruce, and President, decided to commute sentences of those with crack powder sentencing disparities, which is crazy because Joe Biden was the guy who was on the Senate floor talking about punishing crack and cocaine and making the argument that you should have mandatory sentencing. In many ways, Joe Biden's the godfather of the current, three strike system and mandatory sentencing and a lot of these things. So then he's going to come out and because his son is a crackhead, now come out and then pardon these people. Sentencing disparities who were determined by the DOJ to not have a high likelihood of recidivism. He also decided to commute the sentences of 21 petitioners on home confinement from Rosa. And we got more emails because the clock has not run out yet. Then on January 19th, 2025, it says, hi, Steph and Fiona. On January 19th, okay, clock is ticking. POTUS met with Ed, Bruce, Steve, Annie, and Anthony, and the president decided the following clemency actions. And they're doing a good job papering the records. Like Joe decided all of this. The president decided to grant a pardon to this guy, Ernest. And the president decided to rescind his approval for Don. I don't know what Don did. Now, the president decided to grant, look at this, preemptive pardons to the following individuals: James Biden, Sarah Jones Biden, Valerie Biden Owens, John T. Owens, Francis W. Biden, going all the way back to 2014. A criminal family. Joe Biden said he was never going to do that or pardon Hunter. He pardoned his whole friggin' family. In addition to the president's decision to grant preemptive, right? They say this constantly. Joe Biden decided it. I'm sure he did. Pardons to the members of Congress and the January 6th Select Committee. Okay, they're all a part of this decision. So this decision and this meeting is critical. Now we want to know, okay, on January 19th, so who was actually in that meeting? Who was there? And they then approved it. The president decided on January 19th to grant also to the following individual pardons: the Metro Police and the Capitol Police officers who testified before the J6 committee. And then we get a little bit more. Now, this is a curious one. We did not find specific meeting notes that clearly mention or note that the president was present. He wasn't there at the meetings. That's curious. Here is more. Here's a memo for the president. This one came out, says the president has seen this, put a stamp on it. Like we shoved it in his face for 2 seconds. December 13th, 2024, they have this other memo. Comes from Ken LeBolt. They've lost the election and they're trying to now pardon everybody as quickly as they possibly can. So this comes from Ben LeBolt, senior advisor, and it comes from Karine, historic press secretary, can't forget her, saying the subject, coverage roundup of your clemency actions. They say, hey, Joe, your communications and press team compiled a report of the media coverage on your historic action to pardon your corrupt family to over 1,500 Americans, the most ever on a single day. You did it, Joe. Your announcement generated significant positive press coverage. And they go, look at all this. Your social media. They give us a full report. Biden selects record number for clemency. Look at this, Joe. Congratulations. USA Today. Hospitals give mothers meds and more. And then we get to section F, another memo. This one comes out December 10th. It says, from Ed Siskel, memo for Joe Biden, White House counsel, says, we recommend you, Joe Biden, use your clemency authority to commute to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole the sentences of the 37 people the current attorney general would not authorize for death. Currently, 40 people are under investigation. Your staff has received significant outreach from the NAACP, ACLU, the Catholic bishops, and even the Pope. Yeah, Catholics are very opposed to the death penalty. Even under today's charging practices, 3 of the 40 individuals would still qualify for a death sentence because they committed mass casualty, hate crimes, or terrorism. You could commute the sentences of the other 37 individuals to life imprisonment without parole. And now you can see that Just the News is explaining more, saying this uncovered an early memo that shows on day 1, they said original hand signatures. But then by the end, it was verbal approval signatures, and there's even evidence that he wasn't at the meeting. Records show it was disseminated to everybody. Joe Biden said in June 2025, we remember this statement, "I made the decisions about the pardons. Any suggestion that I didn't is ridiculous." And I think this is probably just the beginning of a bunch of additional records that will come out on this, saying despite retroactive emails detailing Biden's presence at the meeting, the National Archives has no contemporaneous staff notes for any meeting attendees that could confirm the president was even there or even gave verbal approval to those clemency acts. So it's just an email from Rosa? Like, we're all asking, what is the chain of custody for the decision-making and the authoritative power? Did it even go through Joe? There's really no evidence of that other than Rosa's email. So hopefully Rosa is also going to get a little message from James Comer, because other people are coming in to testify today. Here was this dude walking in, not saying anything.
Cooperation with the committee. Do you want to say anything about, how Biden's doing currently right now after his decision?
What do you plan to tell the committee?
Are you concerned that anyone could be criminally charged?
Doesn't want to say much, but it's happening today, and James Comer is going to fill us in on it because he's also calling out this bombshell memo. He says, a new memo shows that the White House counsel undermined his claims that he personally approved the pardons. The memo shows that in his final year, Biden was increasingly deferring to Kamala and not using his own judgment or presidential power, which is a problem. Now, Joe also may have had a fall. Some people are saying it's a cancer removal, but he also just had a big gash on his head, right? Some people saying that's skin cancer removal. Some people saying maybe that's just stitches because he cracked his head open or something, but doctors can be the judge of that. But here's what the president is up to right now. So he's got skin cancer, prostate cancer, early onset dementia, and all of the things. And he was just in charge of the entire country because the Democrats were lying to us about his capabilities. But Comer was out earlier in the week, and he said this when he was having a conversation about the status of this investigation into the corrupt Bidens.
And can you give us a status check on where you are in this investigation?
Yeah, well, these are the last 3 that we have scheduled transcribed interviews for. We may expand it, but thus far we're going to have interviewed close to a dozen former Biden staffers, high-level staffers. I mean, these are from chiefs of staff, the White House spokespeople, and what we're trying to determine is whether or not Joe Biden had any idea who was using that Autopen and what was being signed with his name on that Autopen. And thus far, Maria, we haven't gotten a lot of evidence that would suggest he had any clue as to what was going on. And the reason this investigation is important is because all of these pardons, the thousands of pardons that were signed with the Autopen, as well as the legal documents like the executive orders that were signed with the Autopen, these are all in question now. And I think that this investigation will go a long way in determining whether or not President Trump and the courts can declare all of those pardons and executive orders null and void.
Man, that would be an epic reversal. Liz Cheney, Adam Schiff, they're all just sleeping in their beds, nestled all cozy right next to their pardons. And then we learn they're invalid and you just rip them away from Liz. Oh gosh, I can't wait.
While he was seeing his memory decline and his overall health decline, is that what you have taken away from this?
Yes, and we had the doctor in, Dr. O'Connor. We asked him a simple question. Were you ever told to lie about President Joe Biden's health? And he pled the Fifth Amendment. I mean, he couldn't even answer that question. So we brought in a lot of people that we know used the Autopen. They were the ones who physically put the documents and hit the power button to sign Joe Biden's name. And they never saw Joe Biden. President never said, here, sign my name on this Autopen or whatever. So we're trying to find who that person was that started this chain of events that resulted in documents being signed with the Autopen. We had Ian Sams, who was a huge critic of me during the Biden investigation, who was a huge critic of the Hur report, who would go on TV constantly and say he spoke with Joe Biden and Joe Biden's at the top of his game. He said under oath, he only spoke, physically met with Joe Biden, looked him in the eye, spoke to Joe Biden 2 times over a 2-year period. But yet he would go out almost on a daily basis and imply to the world that, yeah, I've been with President Biden and he's at the top of his game. So there was clearly a cover-up of Joe Biden's mental decline. What we're trying to get down to is the specific instances when Joe Biden's signature was used on the Autopen. And just last week, Maria, there was a letter that surfaced from the Department of Justice, from the Merrick Garland Department of Justice to the White House saying, look, you can't use that Autopen on legal documents. So they were warned from their own Department of Justice about about overusing that Autopen, yet they continue to do it.
Unbelievable.
And got
So,
his whole family, Fauci, and some of the most heinous people who deserve justice pardoned using the pen. So we're happy to see that the Oversight Committee is digging into it, and it feels like this might be the start of something big. Like, you know, they're going to just continue. They're doing these searches. They're assembling the chain, and it shows. Joe Biden was probably not even in those meetings, as we all know. So we'll see if there's any other evidence to respond to that. Otherwise, it sounds like their chain of custody, their papering the file is Rosa Poe. So it'll be interesting to start with her. She's probably just sending the memos out. And so we'll see if these people all get Anthony Bernal, probably, right? Jill's work husband. We'll see what they were really up to. Happy to see progress on this, and we'll keep our eye on this, my friends. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do.